A few years ago, a man walked into a car dealership and walked out having spent $4 million more than he planned. He didn't lose his wallet. Nobody tricked him. He was just influenced. The salesman offered him a free coffee, cracked a couple of jokes, let him sit in the car for 20 minutes with the seat adjusted to his height, the mirrors set to his angle. By the time the numbers came out, the man didn't feel like he was buying a car anymore. He felt like he was keeping something that was already his. That's not magic. That's not manipulation. That's psychology, working exactly as designed. And today, I'm going to break down the 7 laws of influence that govern almost every decision you make, whether you know it or not. Today's topic is influence. And before you click off thinking, I don't need to manipulate people, let me stop you right there. Influence is not manipulation. Influence is understanding why people do what they do, and using that knowledge to communicate better, lead better, negotiate better, and yes, protect yourself from people who are trying to manipulate you. These 7 laws are backed by decades of psychology research. They were popularized by Dr. Robert Cialdini, a social psychologist who spent 3 years undercover studying the world's best salespeople, negotiators, and recruiters. What he found will change how you see every conversation you've ever had. Let's get into it. Law 1. Reciprocity. Here's a question. If someone gives you a gift, do you feel a little obligated to give something back? Of course you do. We all do. That's reciprocity, and it might be the oldest social contract in human history. In a famous study by psychologist Dennis Reagan, participants were more likely to buy raffle tickets from a stranger, twice as many tickets, if that stranger had previously bought them an unsolicited Coca-Cola. A free Coke, worth almost nothing, and yet it doubled purchasing behavior. Why? Because the human brain is wired to hate imbalance. When someone gives us something, we feel an invisible debt, and that discomfort doesn't go away until we settle it. Marketers know this. That's why brands give you free trials, free samples, free ebooks. The free thing isn't the product. The free thing is the obligation. How to use this? Give generously and genuinely before you ask for anything. Whether in business, relationships, or leadership, the person who gives first almost always gets more in return. How to protect yourself? Ask, did I actually want this gift, or am I just feeling pressure to return it? Recognizing the trigger breaks its power. Law 2. Commitment and consistency. Once we say we'll do something, especially out loud, we feel a deep psychological pressure to follow through. Not because of logic, but because we want to appear consistent to ourselves and others. This is called the consistency principle, and it's terrifyingly effective. In a Stanford study, researchers went door to door asking homeowners to place a tiny "Drive safely" sticker in their window. Almost everyone said yes. It's a small ask. 2 weeks later, researchers returned and asked them to place a massive, ugly billboard in their front yard that said "Drive carefully." The homeowners who had agreed to the sticker, 76% said yes to the billboard. The control group, who had never been asked about the sticker, only 17% agreed. That first small yes rewired their self-image. I'm the kind of person who cares about road safety. And they couldn't back out without feeling like a hypocrite. This is called the foot-in-the-door technique, and it's used everywhere, from sales to politics to cults. How to use this? Start with small commitments. Get a yes on something easy before you propose the bigger ask. How to protect yourself? Pause before every small yes. Ask, where is this leading? Would I agree to the logical next step? Law 3. Social proof. Here's something wild. People are more likely to donate to a charity if they're shown that other people have already donated. We look to other people's behavior to decide what our behavior should be, especially when we're uncertain. Cialdini called this social proof. You probably call it following the crowd. Either way, it's a primal instinct. In ancestral times, if everyone was running in the same direction, you didn't stop to ask why. You ran. This is why restaurants display most popular dish labels. Why Netflix shows you what's trending. Why YouTube shows subscriber counts. Why Amazon shows 4.8 stars from 47,000 reviews. Every single one of those signals is saying, other people chose this. So should you? In one experiment, hotel guests were significantly more likely to reuse their towels when the sign read, "The majority of guests in this room reuse their towels," versus a generic environmental message. Same ask, completely different result. Because humans don't just want to do what's right. They want to do what others like them are doing. How to use this? Share testimonials, reviews, and real numbers. Let your audience see that people like them have already made the leap. How to protect yourself? Popularity is not the same as quality. Ask, why do I want this, separate from what everyone else is doing? Law 4. Authority. In 1963, psychologist Stanley Milgram ran one of the most disturbing experiments in history. Participants were told by a scientist in a lab coat to administer electric shocks to another person, a stranger, every time they answered a question wrong. The shocks ranged from mild to danger, severe. The person being shocked was actually an actor, but the participants didn't know that. 65% administered the maximum shock level, simply because someone in a white coat told them to. That is the power of perceived authority. We defer to experts, titles, uniforms, and credentials, often without questioning whether those credentials are even relevant. This is why ads use doctors to sell medicine, lawyers to sell legal services, and athletes to sell everything. How to use this? Establish your credibility early. Share your experience, your credentials, your track record, not to show off, but to earn trust faster. How to protect yourself? Ask, is this person actually an expert in this specific area, or am I being dazzled by unrelated authority? Law 5. Liking. Simple truth. We say yes to people we like. And we like people who are similar to us, who compliment us, who are familiar to us, and who we find attractive. Research shows that physically attractive people are more likely to be hired, earn higher salaries, receive lighter sentences in court, and be more persuasive across almost every context. But attractiveness isn't just physical. It's warmth. It's humor. It's remembering someone's name. In one study, negotiators who spent just a few minutes finding common ground before a business deal reached an agreement 18% more often than those who went straight to business. The content of the deal didn't change. The people liked each other more. That was enough. How to use this? Find genuine common ground. Mirror body language subtly. Use people's names. Be warm before you're persuasive. How to protect yourself? Ask, am I agreeing because this is a good deal, or because I like this person? Liking someone doesn't make them right. Law 6. Scarcity. Only 3 left in stock. Offer expires in 24 hours. Limited edition. You've seen all of these. You've felt all of these. Scarcity makes things feel more valuable, and potential loss is one of the most powerful motivators in human psychology. In a study by Wirchel, Lee, and Adewole, participants were given cookies from 2 identical jars, one with 10 cookies, one with only 2. The cookies were rated as tastier, more valuable, and more desirable from the jar with fewer cookies. The cookies were identical. Loss aversion, our deep fear of missing out, is twice as powerful psychologically as the equivalent gain. We work harder to avoid losing $10,000 than we do to earn $10,000. How to use this? Be honest about real limits, limited spots, real deadlines, genuine exclusivity. Manufactured scarcity eventually backfires when people figure it out. How to protect yourself? When you feel urgency, slow down. Ask, is this actually rare, or am I being made to feel like it is? Law 7. Unity. Cialdini added this 7th law decades after his original work, and some argue it's the most powerful of all. Unity isn't about liking the same music or coming from the same city. It's deeper than that. It's about shared identity, family, tribe, faith community, nation, culture. When someone feels like they are part of the same we as you, not just similar, but genuinely the same group, they become extraordinarily willing to help, agree, follow, and trust. This is why political leaders lean so hard into national identity. Why religious leaders invoke shared belief before asking for sacrifice. Why great managers build team culture before asking for extra effort. In experiments, people were significantly more cooperative with strangers who simply shared their birthday. A meaningless coincidence, because it triggered a sense of we. How to use this. Build shared identity consciously. Co-create things with your audience. Use we language. Involve people in your mission, not just your product. How to protect yourself. The we feeling can be weaponized, especially in-group versus out-group thinking. Ask, am I doing this because it's genuinely right, or because my group does it? So there you have it. 7 laws that shape almost every significant decision you'll ever make. Reciprocity, commitment, social proof, authority, liking, scarcity, unity. Now here's the most important thing I want you to take from this video. Knowledge of these laws is your armor. The people who don't understand influence get moved by it invisibly. You now have the map. You can see the strings. Use that to communicate better, protect yourself, and build relationships that actually last. Not because you manipulated someone, but because you understood them. If this video made you think differently about even one interaction in your life, hit like. It helps more than you know.